Welcome back, everybody, to pixelprojectradio, a video game discussion-style podcast where we talk all about the video games that we love, and some that you love too. You're not dreaming. No, you're wide awake. Although, maybe our mellifluous tones, the dulcet, chocolatey tones of our voices might put you to sleep. Although I hope not, I guess. Self-burn. This is Rick, of course, your host. Hostess with the mostest, as always. Just a quick little plug before we begin. Stick around to the end of the show. We're going to plug all of our socials. That's right, I've got a couple of great guests here today. We're going to plug all of those socials. We've got a review in, so I'm going to read that, and it's going to be a great time. So, without further ado, I've got to introduce my good friends here today, two returning veterans of the show. And, well, as always, I'm going to go in the order of the Discord call, because that's just what makes sense, eh? First up, we've got Low 5 Gaming's own, the man with the plan, part of the dynamic duo. You might say one half of the dynamic duo, actually, if you're a math person. We've got Alex here. Alex, man, thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you, Rick. And the math does check out. I am one half of Low 5 Gaming. Excited to be talking about this game with you guys. Excited to be on the mic with Keith as well. I don't think we've had the chance to talk about games together yet, Keith. We've just competed in the Retro Olympics.
Yeah, hot competition there. Yeah, we've never really been able to like buddy up and really tackle any one game that we particularly love. So, or I guess I don't know your feelings on this game. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but
well, if the audience stick around, I'll let them know.
Right.
Yeah, you might say that we've got some stuff to say about this. And as Alex alluded to, and that handsome sounding voice that you all just heard, we've got a returning member onto the show in the form of Keith from the main quest. You might remember him from the Cadence of Hyrule episode. So this is not only his second time on the show, but it's all Zelda for Keith. All Zelda all the time. Keith, man, how you doing?
I'm doing really good. Yeah, and a proper Zelda title as well. Cadence of Hyrule doesn't really count, but you know. But yeah, I'm doing really good. Thanks for having me back. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. Whenever I knew that I wanted to get a couple of guests for this game because, spoiler alert, I'm not a big Zelda guy. And we'll talk about that as we go on. But yeah, could not have asked for two better gentlemen to talk about this game. So, as you all saw in the title, we are talking about The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Now, quick caveat, we are not talking about the Switch remake that came out in 2019. We are talking about the good old Game Boy version. And I'm really excited about that. I played DX. I don't know about you guys. DX doesn't really take anything away. It just adds color and some optional stuff that we'll talk about. But I think that's the way to play it. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
I played the original version like less than a year ago at this point. I actually put out an episode on my feed on it. And at the time, I didn't have a proper handheld to play it on. So I was just emulating it and messing with some shaders. So if I wanted color in it, I could just throw it in there. And I knew I really wasn't missing too much because the DX version, as you just said, Rick, doesn't really change anything at all. So I sort of played the DX version also, but not. So I just don't think you're losing too much, depending on... You're not losing anything picking one over the other.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And we'll talk about the tiny differences as we go along. Just one quick little aside here. So as Nintendo Month continues, that's right, this has been Nintendo Month, you might be expecting a beat-by-beat story for this last episode, which is typically what we do. That's not going to be the case today, because as we're going to see, this game does have a story. It's certainly more story-focused than A Link to the Past, but it still isn't really deep enough to need a beat-by-beat kind of deal. So we're going to talk about it in broad strokes towards the end. Still a very cool story, though. So why don't we get into it? What is Link's Awakening? Well, Link's Awakening marks The Legend of Zelda's first foray into the handheld market. What was originally developed as a port of A Link to the Past developed momentum from eager developers, and before long turned into one of the series' most unique mainline installments. Players play as Link, and after washing up ashore on the mysterious island of Koholint, set off on a journey to help rid the island of nightmares and wake the elusive, sleeping windfish. What do you guys think? Would you add anything to that? How was it?
That's good, man. It checks out.
Waking the windfish is not innuendo at all.
No.
No, it's not. Though you could use it that way. We're not going to police your language. So, as we are wont to do at the top of our episodes, we're going to give a little TLDR review and then talk a little bit about how we feel about the game before we launch into a full discussion. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Great. So we'll go in reverse order this time. So, Keith, do you want to tell us, real TLDR style, what do you think about The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening?
So Link's Awakening, I think, is a great addition to the Game Boy library. You know, with context of when it came out and how it plays today, it feels incredibly organic for what it is, and it feels relatively intuitive, minus some very small things with the menu and the jumping mechanic that's introduced in this game. But other than that, for what it is, there really wasn't anything like this on the Game Boy up until its release. And even after, adventure games like, you know, the Final Fantasy series that came out on the Game Boy a little bit later, the Legend series, weren't as quite as polished as this game is. So I think if you're willing to go back this far and play a very early handheld Zelda game, you're going to have a good time with this.
Yeah, well said. Well said. And I agree with all of that. Now, just out of curiosity, man, how many Mr. Rights out of 10 would you give this one?
Mr. Rights. I hate numbers, man.
They're all made up and they don't matter.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8. 8 Mr. Rights out of 10.
Hell yeah, you love to see it. All right, Alex, as our second guest, what do you have to say?
Yeah, so my TLDR, Rick, is Link's Awakening is a love letter to the unexpected and the whimsical. Its peculiarities... Wait, let me try that again. Its peculiarities are an asset, serving up an experience that's weird as it is wonderful, and it's the perfect departure from Hyrule.
Yeah, just as I said with Keith, really well said. Now, my question to you, if you had to rank this, how many windfish eggs out of 5 would you give this one?
Oh, you're messing with the numbers. 10 to 5. That's messing my scales off now. But I'm going to say this. For Link's Awakening, the original DMG game, the original Game Boy game, I'm going to give it a 4. But I'm going to bump that number up as you hit the DX and then the Switch version. I know we're not talking about the Switch version today, but I think that is that is pretty much a 1-to-1 of the DX game. It's just, updated graphics.
Right.
So I'm going to say 4, and it hurts me to go low on that because I love this game so much, but I do think there's just enough sprinkled on there to bring that to 5 windfish eggs for the DX version.
Ooh. And yeah, I like to mess with the numbers a little bit. Some might say that 5 is half of 10. So since you are half of low 5, 5 is in the name, man. I think I did a pretty good job on the spot here. Okay. I have some thoughts as well, and I have written them down as, because that's how I'm most comfortable. So here's a little TLDR that I have to say about this. Link's Awakening is a game about impermanence and acceptance. It was no small feat to bring the beloved Legend of Zelda franchise to handhelds after the success of A Link to the Past, and yet despite this, a small group of developers, fueled with creativity and curiosity, and probably caffeine, created an experience that was weird and wonderful, full of exploration, whimsy, and humor. Link's Awakening is a crowning achievement for the Game Boy, and is my personal favorite Zelda game. I'm going to give this, 6 out of 8 bow wows for me. This is a great game.
Along with that caffeine, probably a lot of lucky strikes.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. That was all the rage back then, man. Whew. Different times, different culture, different times. This is a terrific game. There's really no two ways about it. I'm not even a really big Zelda fan. I'm going to be perfectly honest on this podcast, and I'm sure this is going to turn a lot of people off. But, I watch clips of Breath of the Wild. I'll watch clips of Tears of the Kingdom. I could not be less interested in playing those games. It's nothing against them. I'm sure they're great. I recognize that they are terrific for what they are. I just, personally, for me, I could not care less. And that, going off of that, 2D Zeldas are really the ones that I prefer. I haven't beat Link to the Past, I'll be honest, but I've played a bit of it, played the Oracle games, played Link's Awakening, and man, something about Zelda 2D just clicks for me. I love it. And I have some thoughts why once we start talking about this game as a game. But, we'll get there. And I guess that is to say, too, if you are a Zelda fanatic and you're listening to this expecting like a primary source of all things Zelda and extreme deep dives with information you've never heard, all I could say is we're funny. We're three funny guys on mic. We're charming. But it's not, at least for me, it's not going to be, the Zelda Fanatics podcast. I apologize about that. But we did play this game. We liked this game a lot. And I think we've all got a lot to say.
Well, your comments have me a little nervous now, Rick. I've heard Keith's opinions on Breath of the Wild. So I've got a couple Zelda haters over here. But you know what? I've got the Hyrule Historia right next to me. I've got my little Link amiibo right in front of me for some inspiration. So I'm here. I'm here for those folks that are.
Yeah, I got a couple books on my bookshelf behind me here. So speak for yourself. Also, hey, thanks for calling me funny, I guess.
Hey, man, I only pick the funniest, most handsome, or otherwise most attractive guests for my show because, the audience can tell.
I was waiting to see if you were actually baiting me into a Breath of the Wild discussion. I'm not taking the bait.
No. I don't want to talk about that game today.
Me either.
But I am glad that you're both here. But speaking of folks that have a lot to say, our Discord members have a lot to say. So let's talk about it. We've got our community forum here where members of our Discord can submit their thoughts, their feelings about the games that we're playing, and we have got some just really great responses today. And we're going to start with Chris from A Novel Console Podcast. Shout out to Chris. Shout out to A Novel Console. Good stuff. Here's what he has to say. Link's Awakening might be my third favorite Zelda game of all time. It's the first Zelda game I bought with my own money. It was $30 at KB Toys. I haven't heard that name in a minute. I had a very difficult time playing the game due to English not being my first language, but I persevered and eventually finished the game by sheer brute force of will. Watching the game's ending without having any context about what's going on is shocking, to say the least. I can imagine. The team at Nintendo did an amazing job of creating a whole console-quality Zelda title on such a small screen. It is impressive to see and even more impressive to play. The dungeons were well made, the overworld was interesting, the amount of different characters with different personalities felt better realized than the NPCs in A Link to the Past. The game is just a technical marvel. Yeah, I don't have anything to add on to that. Here. And geez, kudos to Chris for playing this with English not being his native language. I cannot imagine.
So I just want to kind of, I guess, ruffle some feathers here because the comparisons to Link to the Past are appropriate because this game started out as like a port of A Link to the Past until the project just kind of went off and developers did their own thing with it. And I'm going to say this game is better than A Link to the Past. I'm just going to come right out and say that, and I don't know. Alex is smiling over here. Like he's got something to say, but there's just something so... I keep using the word organic. I feel like I should hop off of that. But there's something so organic about the way the story unfolds. And just as Chris said in his little blurb there, how the NPCs actually matter in the progression of the game. Whereas in A Link to the Past, like, you don't really have to talk to a majority of the people in that game. And it's also just a very nice, concise, pocket-sized adventure. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, there really wasn't anything like this. And to what, again, Chris's point, it is a technical marvel. It is amazing what they were able to do with this game so early in the Game Boy's life. Because before this, all they were really doing was side-scrolling platformers mostly, and just a ton of sports games. And right off the bat, Nintendo EAD just slapping that big ropey cock on the table with that cutscene at the beginning of the game with Link getting shipwrecked. It was just, there's nothing like that up to the point on the Game Boy. And they got there eventually.
Wild for the Game Boy, yeah.
What was that? Sorry.
No, I agree 100%. Like that cutscene in the beginning, like, you know, for all the games that, like, I mean, you said it perfectly. Until that time, like, we didn't have cutscenes like that on the Game Boy, or even like in, you know, not even, some NES titles don't have like as good of cutscenes as the beginning of Link's Awakening. It's just really cool. You got me giggling earlier because one of my biggest gaming sins, especially as a Zelda stan, is I have never beat A Link to the Past. It's still on my shelf. Still have to take it down. We were a Sega family instead of a Nintendo family growing up, so I didn't get A Link to the Past until my adult life. So I'd have to say that this game's better too, because I've beaten it 100 times, and I've never beat A Link to the Past.
Man, Keith, just listening to your, well, first of all, I mean, well said, both of you, but Keith, just listening to what you had to say, I swear you must have been just with me as I played through this game, because I feel so similarly to a lot of that. But I'm going to save that for when we get there into the notes. If it's cool, I'm going to move us on to the next contributor. We've got Dave from the podcast Tales from the Backlog. Shout out to Dave. Shout out to Tales from the Backlog. Shout out to everybody. All right? We don't discriminate here. Here's what Dave has to say. Link's Awakening was the first Zelda game I ever played, all the way back on the Game Boy Pocket, then again with the DX version on Game Boy Color. I didn't have the full context of the series back then, but I've since come to appreciate how familiar it feels within the, quote, Zelda formula, while also standing out by not being a tale of Link, Princess Zelda, and Ganon, along with its strange, dreamlike atmosphere and poignant story moments. Even after playing A Link to the Past and the other 2D Zelda classics, Link's Awakening still stands at the front of the pack. Yeah, hear.
I'm glad most of us are enjoying this better than Link to the Past. That's actually very surprising.
I did start up Link to the Past not too long ago, and it's I mean, it's fun, but I think there's something magical about, I mean, there's going to be people that say that that's the best game, the best Zelda game of all time. I'm not one of those people, and I do think that this one, I don't want to spoil the whole episode, but we did a top 10 list, and I didn't even I did Breath of the Wild as an honorable mention, which threw my co-host in a tizzy. But it's because we have games like this, and, you know, you can't, I mean, I understand the importance of Breath of the Wild. I understand it's a great game, and I do love that game. But something like this game, as far as, you know, its importance in the Zelda timeline and history, not the timeline, scrap that, like the Zelda timeline.
You want to get into it?
But like the actual, like when I say timeline, I mean like the release of Zelda games or whatever. Like this game it really stands out because it's not in Hyrule. It's very different than all the other ones, and it has so much weird stuff going on with it, and it's just an all around great game, which is fun to see. Like for the community forum posts, just all these folks just mentioning how much they love this game.
And I know, like, we've been beating up on A Link to the Past, and I do want to say, I like A Link to the Past. It's probably top 5 Zelda games for me, but I tend to like the more out-of-the-box type of Zeldas a little bit more. So, like, Majora's Mask, or, I was going to say Minish Cap, but that's still kind of in the regular Zelda formula. So, yeah, I just have more of an attachment to this game because it is just kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely very weird. And speaking of weird, we've got a short community correspondence here from Ray Ray, known around our parts as Ray Ray the Quiet Man. What a game. Here's what he has to say. I just like the commercial of the rapping dude on the original Link's to the Awakening TV commercial. He was down with Zelda from the start. Have you guys seen this commercial?
No.
Probably not in a very long time.
I'm going to put it in right now. Let's take a listen to it.
Down with Zelda from the very start. I got the heart, it's Mars to play the part. Down with Zelda. Creeping through with an overhead view, cause a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. So I stay on track, collect the facts, never cut slack, and I always watch my back for Jack. Down with Zelda, yeah. Strong I stand again. I'm the man with the plan, cause the power's in my head and the power's in my hand. Down with Zelda.
That really is something. That is so 90s. Kind of like late 80s, 90s. I love it. That's the American commercial. The Japanese commercial doesn't have rapping. It just kind of has like a sing-song kind of deal. But they're using these puppets that are like imagine HR Puffin stuff, but like slightly less disturbing. They just look like that. It's bizarre. These are great. They're on YouTube. They're like 30 seconds. Check them out if you're at home listening and you haven't seen them. But we do have one more. And thank you, Ray, by the way. We've got one more community correspondence to read, and this is a long one. This is from Poppy the Keaton. Here's what he has to say. Fun fact, Link's Awakening is the game where we learn that chain chomps aren't native to the Mushroom Kingdom, but are an invasive species from Hyrule. Yeah, hold on, because it gets crazier. The Zelda timeline is a mess, but we know that the Mario timeline tends to follow the release order, Yoshi Island games being an outlier. We first see chain chomps in Super Mario 3. In Super Mario 2, we learn that Mario goes to the world of Subcon, which is ruled by the evil Wart. Wart also appears in Link's Awakening, but he is a friendly frog dude named Mamu, whose band is going on tour. I swear to God that's real, everybody. He teaches Link a song and then disappears. Chain chomps appear in Hyrule in Four Swords and A Link to the Past. Chain chomps also appear in Link's Awakening as pets. Therefore, we can hypothesize the following. 1. Mamu, aka Wart, left Koholint Island to go on tour. He and his band went on tour to other dimensions, since Koholint Island is a pocket dimension, and his fans and crew followed him. They brought their beloved chain chomp pets with them. 2. While Mamu was on tour, Link wakes up and Koholint Island ceases to exist. Mamu has no way to return home, so he sets up base in Subcon, which is another dream-based dimension, so that makes sense. 3. Being unable to return home twists Mamu into Wart. 4. Mario invades Subcon through a door that does not disappear when Mario enters it at the beginning of Super Mario Bros. 2. And 5. We can theorize that Chain Chomp snuck through that door and into the Mushroom Kingdom, which is why they are in Super Mario Bros. 3, as well as several games after that. I feel just reading that, I feel like Charlie going over Pepe Sylvia.
Yeah.
How does that explain away Goombas, Shy Guys, Kirby, the Yoshi doll?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Right from SimCity, as we mentioned.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's what I said. I've got a million of them. I've got a million. Keith is not smiling, everybody. I've got a million of them. But this, first of all, Poppy the Keaton, it just blew my mind with the most incredible response ever. Future folks writing in, do not write that long, because I won't read it. I'm going to be honest. But this was just too spectacular not to read. That does bring us into the sort of weirdness of this game. And we might as well start with the characters. There are a lot of characters in here from other Nintendo IPs, because as we talked about, this game started as a sort of idea to port A Link to the Past to Game Boy. We're going to talk about development history here in a minute, but the short version is these folks were just developing this game and they started throwing ideas in, like, oh, what if we had Chain Chomps? What if we had Goombas? And that's exactly what's in here. There are Chain Chomps, Goombas, Piranha Plants, Mr. Right from SimCity, a gentleman named Richard from the Japanese game Kaeru no Tame ni Kane wa Naru, which is the frog for whom the bell tolls in English, I think. Just tons of people. Yoshi, Kirby, they're in here too. It is, I think there is some animal pretending to be Princess Peach even, I think. Mm-hmm. It's wild. It's crazy. And that adds to this sort of dreamlike, weird, is this reality or is this a fantasy? Somebody write that down. That would make a good lyric. It just creates that mood, you know? Were you guys into this when you first played this?
Totally. I think it was like even Taryn, Marin's uncle or dad, or I'm not really sure what the relationship is there, but looks a lot like Mario, right? And then we've already mentioned like the Yoshi doll being sprinkled in there. So like, and the Chain Chomps, the Yip Yip, I think they call it, or something like that in this game. But having all of those in there, at the time when I first started playing this game, I was, preteen. I would suppose. I can't even remember how old I was, to be honest. But I didn't know really anything. I hadn't played The Legend of Zelda on Nintendo. I didn't really know anything about Zelda, but I did know about Mario. So having that crossover stuff in there just kind of gave me, anyways, it gave me like a stronger connection with this game. Like it was kind of made it feel like they're all integrated, these Nintendo worlds.
Yeah, I loved playing this game when I was a kid. We had plenty of consoles to go around in my house, and having a Game Boy and having this Zelda, it felt like it was like my own personal Zelda game. And I never really thought of it, the whole concept of it, as like something that was weird, because Zelda didn't really have a formula up to that point. Because there's a Legend of Zelda, and then The Adventure of Link, which is very different from that game, and then there's A Link to the Past, which I don't think I had yet, because this came out a year after, I believe. So we had a Game Boy pretty much at launch, so I don't think we had A Link to the Past yet. So this was like a nighttime game for me. Like I was fortunate enough to have a pretty bright light in my bedroom. So, I have a lot of memories just sitting up in bed and playing this game. And I think a lot of it's like kind of dreary, almost mellow like atmosphere helped, lended something to me, playing it at night for most of its duration. And having all of the Mario characters and stuff in it never really felt weird, because Nintendo products up to that point just kind of felt like this unified thing. So it didn't seem that strange initially, but as I got older and I was thinking about it, I'm like, and then you start playing the rest of the Zelda franchise, you're like, what the hell? What were they doing? Like there's no other mention of these characters anywhere else in the Zelda franchise. So as I got older, I started thinking about it a little more, and it's like, and even now knowing what they did, it's still pretty weird. But back in the day, I never even really thought about it. I just really thoroughly enjoyed the game.
Yeah, I go back to Chris from Inava Consoles, his statement on the game, and it's, making me, I could read at the time. I remember that. So, that was helpful, especially because you have those little huts when you get lost that you grab the phone and it tells you where to go. So sorry, Chris was really plugging around trying to figure things out, because those telephones are really helpful. But, we played, or at least I play games differently back then too than we do today, right? Like today we have just this influx of games. There's so many. And then, at the time when I was playing Link's Awakening, I only had a handful of different games. So I was putting hours into Link's Awakening. I would sit there on this chair in the living room, just playing away. And there's, the seashells in this game, right? So you can collect seashells and you bring them to this place and you can turn it in for different items, like an upgraded sword, that type of deal. But you would talk to your buddies or whatever and figure out where these seashells were, or you would take your shovel and you would hit every fucking sprite in that game and try and find the like, I don't have the patience for that anymore in my adult life, but as a kid, like that's what I was doing. So like when Chris was talking about in his little blurb about, spending all this time and not being able to, understand what they were saying, like I had like memories of myself just like unshoveling the entire earth just to try and find all these seashells, because that's how you did it. That's like, it was just, gaming was just different then.
I want to put a pin in that specifically, because I want to come back to that notion when we talk about just how this game plays, because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But first, I wanted to talk just a little bit about, how this game came to be. We talked a little bit about it already, but this was developed by Nintendo EAD, that's the Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, and published, obviously, by Nintendo. Now, this was not directed by Miyamoto. This was directed by Takashi Tezuka and produced by Miyamoto. Imagine that. Art by Yoichi Kotabe, Masano Arimoto, and Shigefumi Hino. Written by Yoshiaki Koizumi, Kensuke Tanabe. Composed not by Koji Kondo. This is very interesting to me. While Kazumi Totaka did work on this, the composer for Super Mario Land 2, the 6 Golden Coins, and Wii Sports. This was actually mainly composed by Minako Hamano and Kozue Ishikawa. And as far as I can tell, that was those two women's first OST they worked on, which is very surprising to me because this is really good. Really, really good. And we'll talk about that, man. We'll talk about all of that. I was really surprised to learn that this was not like the main Zelda team. But after I learned that, I was like, yeah, this makes total sense.
I'm putting on my nerd glasses here because technically Tezuka was always part of the Zelda team, and this was like the first game where Miyamoto basically gave him the reins, and then from here on out, he was the Zelda guy until Twilight Princess, I think. I might be wrong on that, but he was the Zelda guy for a very long time.
I'm glad you caught that because as I said it, I was like, oh, I should have phrased it better than that.
No, you're good.
But that's why you two are here. As we mentioned briefly, this was released in June of 93 in Japan, August of 93 in the US, and December of 93 in Europe for the Game Boy. The DX version for Game Boy Color came out in 98, December of 98 for Japan and the US, and the next month, January of 99 for Europe. We kind of talked already about this being a sort of unsanctioned side project, but what happened was one of the programmers, Kazuaki Morita, created a Zelda-like with a Game Boy dev kit that he had, just for experimentation. And a lot of folks just kind of started hanging out to tinker and create with it. It was, I've seen it likened several times to like an after-school club. And that creativity and curiosity just kind of snowballed, and it turned into this whole new project. At one point, I saw that Tezuka said that he felt like they were making a parody of Zelda, which... man, I think it's just very funny.
Yeah, it's kind of spot on, actually.
Yeah, in many ways it really is. And, I mean, geez, look what happened. There is a widely known rumor that this game was really, really inspired by Twin Peaks. And let me say, it's true. Yes, it's true. It is on paper, from the mouths of the creators, that Twin Peaks did inspire this game. Have you guys watched that show before?
I have not.
I have been meaning to actually get into it, but it's such a weird source of inspiration. Like, I think I had Play Along on, shout out to Play Along podcast. I had those guys on for my episode on Link's Awakening, and I don't remember who brought it up, but it's like, how popular was Twin Peaks in Japan at the time? Like, that's such a strange pull.
Yeah, I'm not sure how popular it was in Japan, but like, it was a phenomenon here. I watched it for the first time. Oh, I want to say I was dating somebody in 2016 and they were really into it. So I watched it, and I mean, first of all, it's phenomenal. The second season is terrible up until the very end when David Lynch came back and said, I'm doing it my way. Nuts to you. But it's, you know, in retrospect, it makes sense how it was inspired. There's a lot of atmospheric weirdness in Twin Peaks. Dreams are a heavy recurring thematic element. The characters are referred to as suspicious types, is what I saw. And there are a lot of those folks in here. I mean, I don't remember the guy's name, but we find this one gentleman in Link's Awakening, and if you talk to him, he's like, oh, how's it going? I'm just making plans to go get lost in the mountains later. And then later on in the game, you can find him in the mountains, and he's like, hey, I told you, like, here I am. I'm lost. And it's just so weird. There are lots of other ones, like the animal pretending to be Princess Peach. Taron himself is kind of weird. There's a character named Crazy Tracy. And not to mention just, you know, Kirby, Mario, Goombas, all of that being in here. It all lends itself to creating this atmosphere we were constantly questioning. Like, is this real? Like, am I really seeing this? What is happening here? And it's stupendous. It works terrifically well.
I think what you said earlier about how this game is almost like a parody of the franchise also lends to kind of just the way the NPCs act and how they are. What did you call them? Unreliable strangers, or what did you say? What was the terminology?
Suspicious types.
Suspicious types. Whereas like the NPCs act as if they're in this fully fleshed world, but then when you do catch up with them, or as you progress the story, they're still kind of in the same position that they were always in, or like they don't seem to be true to their word almost. So it's almost like you can't really tell what anybody is actually up to, and it makes everything seem incredibly like off. There's something like really off about these people.
It's almost like they're a dream.
I love it. I really do. It's part of the reason, and that's maybe because Majora's Mask was my first. Well, no, this is technically my first Zelda game, but as a kid, me playing this basically just amounted to like cutting down grass, attacking chickens, and stealing from the shop owner. Like I never got very far in this game as a kid. Again, shout out to Chris for.
Do you steal from the shop owner now?
I did.
Thief.
He sheepishly admits. That's yes.
That was such a cool like game break though as a kid to figure that out
and like
to just be able to snake all this stuff.
Yeah, and then like every game I played after that, whether it was an RPG or whatever the hell it was, I would always try and see if I could steal from a shop, and like that was never really a thing in a lot of video games. Not until you get to like the Elder Scrolls series, really.
Right. And it's crazy too, because the process of that is to like grab the item and then kind of get the shopkeeper to turn around and then go fast enough so you can run out the door.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, you just like the thief thing. So they rename your character Thief if you get caught. Right. So it's like, so it had to be like this bug. And then they're like, you know what, let's just leave it in there. And then, we'll like do this little Easter egg for folks.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happens if you are able to successfully run around the shopkeeper and get out with the item, whatever you want to steal, like Alex said, you get a message and it says, hey, you got that for free. Are you proud of yourself? Or it's either are you proud of yourself or are you happy with yourself? And from then on out, you're exactly right. It renames your character automatically to Thief. And that's what everybody calls you. You also get a special photo from that, but we'll talk about the photos here in a minute because they are so cool. But if you try to go back to that shop, and there's only one, if you try to go back to it, the shop owner is waiting for you, and he knows, and he pulls out a ray gun. And I think it's a ray gun. I mean, I don't know. It looks like it, and he just shoots you to death, and it's game over. You lose. You die.
Yep.
I love it. That's so cool. It's like it's a primitive morality system. Kind of.
Right.
I mean, it's primitive, but it's kind of,
I didn't try it in the remake. I'm curious. I feel like they left it in.
You can still do it in the remake.
Oh, you can?
I haven't done it myself, but I know there's like screenshots and stuff, so they definitely left that in. It's one of those things that just kind of ruined other games for me in a lot of weird ways, because I'm in everybody's shop trying to steal stuff, and it just was never happening.
Some might say that the M in main quest stands for moral, because Keith is a moral guy. He doesn't steal from the shopkeeper anymore. He learned his lesson. What does the L stand for in low 5 gaming? Alex, huh? Liar? Is that what it stands for? What does the R stand for in pixelprojectradio, huh? Well, another conversation. Getting us back on track here. There were some recycled ideas from Link to the Past that were brought in to here that they just scrapped for one reason or another. A big one being this idea that an egg hatches on a mountain that causes the end of the world. That was something that apparently was scrapped and recycled into here. And we're going to talk about that, but we just have a couple more things to touch on in terms of development. And one that I was particularly shocked to learn about, and I think one of you brought it up on my show before. I don't remember which one of you it was, but it is the Whistle Stop Tour. What do you fellas know about the Whistle Stop Tour?
Well, it couldn't have been me because I'm not that familiar. I know it was like some sort of competition that was held. That's about all I know. It had to have been Alex.
It's like a big marketing campaign, right? Yeah, I don't know if I brought it up or not, but it's a big marketing campaign that Nintendo did that like hit the railroad lines, and then they stopped, and every city they stopped, they had like some sort of Zelda thing going on.
It was both. It was a marketing campaign and a competition. It was a 3-day event that brought passengers onto a train from New York City to Seattle, And everybody that got on, I mean, presumably you'd have to sign up or something, but everybody that got on, they were given a copy of the game and a Game Boy, and whoever beat the game first got $1,000 in 93 money.
Yeah.
It sounds really stressful, but I found this vintage quote from the Chicago Tribune, and it said, "The contestants had agreed to ride together from New York to Seattle, where they were jacked into their Game Boys for 60 hours straight in mid-August, sleepless till Seattle. The high scorers would win $1,000 for the charities of their choice, but never mind the booty, for they only had eyes for Zelda." Just 10 out of 10 newspaper quote.
Yeah.
Imagine sitting on a public transportation like a train, and guy next to you is jacking into a Game Boy.
Hey man,
Sorry about that.
You rode the subway in New York?
It's not too different than the light rail in Minneapolis.
Especially post-COVID, man. I can't imagine this ever happening today in any stretch of the imagination. I found somewhere, and I tried to corroborate this, but I couldn't, that the winner, a gentleman named Jeff Hansen, was denied the money on a technicality. I couldn't find any more info on that.
I heard about that. I was actually going to bring that up because I was like, didn't something happen where like the guy who won the money cheated somehow, or there's something that happened? I vaguely heard of that too.
I guess we'll never know. Listeners, if you find out, come join our Discord and tell me about it, because I genuinely want to know, or add us on Twitter and, etc. That's crazy, man. What a relic of the 90s. It was a crazier time back then.
It would have been more appropriate to do something like that for Spirit Tracks.
Right.
Because trains?
They should have held a contest to see who could beat the game the fastest in their sleep.
Because this game, it's like a 10, 11 hour game to beat, right? Roughly.
So I don't know if this is current, but I found a YouTube video that I did not watch that said it was the speedrun world record, and it was like 2 hours and 53 minutes.
Damn.
It took me a heck of a lot longer than that. I could tell you that much.
It's a sizable game for a game. I mean, you got a lot of, like Alex said, you got a lot of game out of this for a Game Boy game. And, I'm going to kind of actually go back a little bit on what I said earlier. But Metroid 2 came out on the Game Boy relatively early in its life. And so
I remember that one.
Before that, or before this, you had that. And as large as that game was for its release, still not as long as this, but in comparison.
Yeah, shout out to overworld maps too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Metro did not have that.
It did not. It was fairly more linear than the first game though, so I'll give it that. I still don't think Metroid 2 is a great game, but I respect it a little more than the NES version.
That's another cool thing about this game in particular, just that, like I'm a map nerd, and I always love when there's a good map in a game, and it's a solid map in this game, like the you got a good map in A Link to the Past as well, but there's just something about this map, and I feel that each of those little squares, like it's just perfect.
I don't like the map in A Link to the Past. I like that this map is broken up into like quadrants.
Yep.
Whereas the one in Link to the Past is just like this big vomit of, look at mode 7, look at what we can do with these graphics. It's like, all right,
shout out to mode 7.
Yeah, it looks nice, but it is not practical.
I'm gonna put a double pin in this because it kind of ties into what I put a pin in earlier, talking about like the explorability, because that's maybe one of my biggest like love hates with this game. Just super quick, we mentioned the DX version, which I imagine stands for Director's Cut. Who could say?
Yes.
This was released in late '98 to promote the Game Boy Color. And some of the early criticisms for Link to the Past, listen to me, for Link's Awakening were that it was monochrome and it made things a little bit difficult to navigate. So when the color version came out with the DX, immediately was much better received. And, I too played this on a Game Boy Pocket as a kid, and then I got a Game Boy Color. Even back then, I didn't know anything. I didn't know one side of the sandbox from the other. Even I could tell that the color version was better. It didn't take anything away, the color version, the DX version, but the add-ons, and I'm curious to hear if you guys agree, were superfluous and not necessary. The two biggest ones, I think these might be the only things actually, were there is a color dungeon. Very clearly an afterthought, and by far the weakest dungeon in the game. I don't know. Keith, you said that you played the... Oh, you have played this?
Yes. Yeah. It's included in the remake as well.
Mm.
So yeah, I had the original game in 93, and then eventually when I got a Game Boy Color, then of course gave money to Nintendo, gave another $40 to them, because as you do, I mean, not much has changed. So yeah, I did get the DX version, and yeah, I mean, the color dungeon's there. If you want more Zelda, you get a little bit more there. It's not a good dungeon. I think this might have been you, Rick, when we were talking about Cadence of Hyrule. The puzzles in Zelda are not great, you know. So I think Link's Awakening has probably some of the better dungeons in the 2D Zeldas, and the color dungeon just kind of shits the bed, more or less. And I don't know. I mean, you can do it if you really want to be incredibly overpowered for the rest of the game. You can do it, because the rewards are either a buff to your defense or a buff to your offense, and it really just kind of breaks the game. So, to each his own.
In the form of a colored tunic, you can, I think the red one is double attack power and the blue one is double defense.
Mm-hmm.
At least that makes sense. But yeah, this dungeon's not good. It's just not. But the second thing that the DX version added, and I made a point in my notes to shout out to Alex, who's here with us today. It features a cameraman. There is a cameraman here in the DX version who will come and periodically take your picture across as you do various story elements of the game. If you steal from the shop, for example, he snaps a picture of you. He snaps a picture of you looking out over the sea with Marin, with you playing with Bow Wow the Chain Chomp. And all of these, first of all of these are illustrated. Like they're illustrated like they would be in a book. The art style looks really good. It's very cute. It's not at all hyper realistic or anything like that. Not that Zelda ever got super realistic, but it looks very good. And you could print it out. This was the point of these. You could plug in the Game Boy camera, and you could plug it in, and you could print these out to display. So shout out to Alex. I mean, you showed off your Game Boy camera in the recent Game Boy episode.
I do have a Game Boy camera, and I've got the printer as well. So not only can you get that on the camera, you can print it out and then slap that sticker wherever you want.
Yes, I meant to say printer. You can't print from the camera. You know what I meant. It's listen, I'm 30 or 40 years old, and I don't need this.
30 or 40. That's a big gap right there.
Shout out to Master Shake. He knows what's up. Reception, I mean, what can we say? I'm going to skim over reception a little bit just so we could talk more about the game. It got really good reviews. The biggest things that were criticized on the original were the monochromatic graphics and color scheme, that is to say, and the navigation, which, oh, what the heck. Let's talk about all that now. Let's unrelease all of those pins. So, Zelda games, you know, even looking forward to Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, but also Link to the Past, they have a tendency, in my opinion, to be too big for their own good. And Keith, you had mentioned that I criticize Zelda puzzles. I will always do that. I am a smack talker on Zelda puzzles. I don't think they're good. But also, one thing about Zelda games is everybody says you gotta talk to the NPCs because they're gonna give you hints and clues on where to go. Ocarina of Time specifically, I don't think these hints are good at all. In fact, I would go so far as to say that they're bad and they're obtuse, needlessly obtuse. I don't think that they're set up well. And here in Link's Awakening, it's a little different. And I know I want to hear your thoughts on that too, both of you. I'm sure that you either agree or disagree, but because that's all you can do. But here it's different because the NPCs, like both of you have said, they are better. They're more fleshed out, and they give you hints that make more sense, except for that one fucking kid that every time you talk to him, he's like, you can save by pressing these buttons. What does that mean? I don't know. I'm just a kid. And then he just says that for everything the whole game. It's kind of funny, actually. But while they give you better directions and the map overall is smaller, which is to this game's benefit, some of the secrets, like the seashells in particular, they're just needlessly hidden. Basically, if you're not doing what Alex said earlier and shoveling in every single place that you can, or poking every single wall with your sword to hear if it's bombable, you're not going to find all these seashells. It's needlessly hidden and obfuscated. And that's maybe my biggest gripe with this. I love that the map is smaller and that the hints given to you are more manageable and followable. A+. But some of these hidden things, man, it's just a relic of the time when folks, like you both said, like just didn't have as many games and you had to spend more time with these. Maybe it's that. I don't know. I've talked way too much on this. What do you two think?
Yeah, I mean, I know where you're coming from, and that is frustrating. And but the thing is that like the seashells, we'll just use that as an example. Is they're like a bonus, right? It's like Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild now. Like you don't have to go collect all the seashells. You don't have to go collect all the pieces of Korok shit or whatever it is. Which is, I don't know if you guys know the lore on that, but that's what those are. They're like boop. but anyways, you can get boons for doing it, but you can beat the game without all the seashells. So if you like needed to have all those seashells to beat the game, I would not like the way that they did that. I'd be just about as angry with Zelda as I am with Metroid sometimes, with the fact that you have these false floors, and how the fuck are you supposed to know it's a false floor unless you accidentally fell into it or something like that. Whereas because it's an added bonus, I tend to be a little bit more forgiving on how obscure those seashells can be. So that's the seashell part, but then the NPC part we've been talking about, and I do think that I think you're spot on with your comparing it to like Ocarina of Time maybe not being as helpful. This game, it's talking to NPCs is super helpful, and I think we've been talking about a little bit, but that is what gives those NPCs the flavor that they have. Like when I played this game as an adult, or when I played it as a kid, like I make sure to talk to every single person. And one of my biggest pet peeves about NPCs are NPCs that say the same thing over and over again. And the NPCs in this, like, if there's something that they need to say, or if there's something that's changed in the game, they will change the dialogue, which I think is pretty cool.
I don't know about that. I'm just a kid.
Yeah, well, that one, you got to learn how to save, Rick.
I don't know. Where are you sitting on this, Keith? What do you think?
So one of the things I just thought about in my head, and this is me just kind of throwing things at the wall. I don't know if this is true or not, but the way that the game directs you towards your end goal might have something to do with maybe the development team had the hardware in mind, knowing that since this is probably one of the bigger games that they were making for the Game Boy, knowing that the Game Boy only has like 4 hours of playtime on like batteries or whatever. So maybe that was part of it, where they're just like, okay, we need to have this game be as concise as possible so that people aren't just like going and wasting money on batteries constantly. Again, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just something that just kind of came up in my head when you were talking about how helpful the NPCs are and everything.
Yeah, man, I don't think, I wouldn't call that wrong, but I also don't want to oversell how quote unquote helpful the NPCs are. Like, I want to be clear, this game, like, there's a ton to explore, and that world record being just under 3 hours, I literally cannot imagine. This game took me so long. And, the NPCs are more helpful and the map is smaller, but it's still very, very dense. shout out to Chris again for somehow beating this without talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I don't know. Maybe they did have that concession with the batteries.
Because, I mean, when you're playing on console, that thing's always plugged in, so you really don't have to worry about anything. But that's just, again, just speculation. As far as the seashells go, I agree with Alex that since they're not tied to progression, like it's not a thing that you have to do, I really didn't care about it, nor did I interact with it in the same way that you talk about most Zelda puzzles being bad. I will say that most, if not all, Zelda side quests are bad. They're never good. I can't name of a single side quest in a Zelda game where I was like, man, that was an experience. It's always go get some seashells, go collect kinstones, go find this guy's chickens, go collect wood. It's like, they're all very bad. So the fact that you don't have to do the seashells is nice. So it's like, again, just I just think the entire game, given the size of the map, which again is incredible to pull off on hardware like this, it's just very concise to me and very, no pun intended, compact.
Yeah, very, very concise, but very dense. And it is very impressive by all aspects, by all metrics. This is an incredibly technically impressive game, visually, just content-wise. Every dungeon, I know we're not talking about the music yet, but every dungeon has its own OST track. I think it's every dungeon. I'm almost positive it's every dungeon. On the Game Boy, on this cartridge. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this plays like a 16-bit game, despite coming out on an 8-bit system. And to me, that's just a huge testament to what they were able to do. You know, it's terrific. Speaking of this game kind of innovating and being really good, this had many firsts for the Zelda series. It had a fishing minigame, rudimentary one, but it's there, which automatically, from what I understand, makes this a good game.
Hell yeah.
It has a fishing minigame.
No lies detected.
You can unequip the Master Sword entirely, which is going to come into play with the menu here in a minute. You can combine items. This is the first one where you could combine like a bomb and an arrow, the rock feather that you get, and the Pegasus boots. You get your mirror shield, which shows up in, I think, Ocarina of Time as well as a few others. And speaking of side quests, there really aren't any in this game except for one, the trading side quest. Did you guys do this one at all?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you have to up to a point, right?
Right.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Otherwise, that monkey won't build the bridge or something like that.
Yeah, that monkey will be pissed off.
Yeah.
So the trading side quest, for folks following along at home, I don't remember. I should have written it down. I don't remember the first item that you get, but you find just a random something or other, and eventually you can find somebody that wants it, and you can trade it for a ribbon. And then you take that ribbon to this little baby chain chomp that loves jewels and looking pretty. You give it to her, she gives you dog food. You take the dog food, you give it to, I think it's an alligator who eats it, can and all. Then he gives you something. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. And the reward for completing this is the boomerang. You get the boomerang, which in this game is almost overpowered.
Did you guys enjoy the trading quest? The thing I hear about when I hear people talk about this game is people kind of shitting on that.
This is one of those games where it's like so folded into my nostalgia of like video games and Nintendo and stuff that I'm like, I don't know, I've just always dug it. If I were to approach this game for the first time, I might not like it. But every time I play it, it's always like, it was interesting for me when I revisited this game on the Switch version, right? The Switch update, because there was like, it had been years since I had tackled this game for on Game Boy, but there was that memory of like, what would you call it? it was just like ingrained in my memory, like what to do, where to go. And the side quests were part of that, or the trade quest was part of that. Like I once I got the bananas, I was like, oh yeah, shit, I got to go trade these bananas up. And if I don't do that, I won't get to this part. So, it's weird when you play a game at such a point in your youth to come back to it as an adult. Like it's hard for me to give like a solid, like, oh, that trade quest is shit, because like, I don't know, for me, it's just so much ingrained in this game,
I'm going to be totally honest. With this game, I was going about 50-50 with guide and without guide. That's another thing, man. Like, if you're going to play this game, if you want to use a guide, that's fine. But don't do what I did and play this on a deadline, because this game suffers from like trying to get through it, if that makes sense. You got to give yourself time to exist in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But for the trade quest specifically, I used a guide completely. And if I weren't, I could definitely see how it would be frustrating. And at its core, I mean, all it is get item, give item, rinse and repeat. So I can see why people don't like it. I'm not particularly attached to it.
What is the dungeon where you have to start jumping through floors? Like that one as a kid drove me nuts, because the only reason that you would figure that out is if you just got like upset with the game and decided to fall into a hole, So it's like that type of thing. It's nice with like approaching with the guides these days.
I'm like you, Alex. Like, I don't know if it's just because I played this game so much that when I did play the remake and then when I played it again for my show, I was like, oh yeah, this is, in my mind, I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty intuitive. It's not as bad as people say, but I played this game so much that it's probably just in the recesses of my mind already. It's just, and I can just pull it up as soon as I start playing the game, because it's like, to me, it's like, oh, okay. If you're talking to the NPCs, if you talk to the chain chomp, it's clearly upset because, it doesn't have something. And they're mentioned that the chain chomp is actually a girl. And then you get the bow and you're like, oh, well, obviously I need to give this bow to the chain chomp probably. And then when you go to the banana gator and the gator gives you bananas and you're like, didn't I see a monkey somewhere? Oh, I should go take these bananas to the monkey. So to me, it's intuitive, but I suppose like, yeah, I guess if you've never played it before, I could see getting frustrated, especially if you're not talking to everybody.
I will say not all of it is. I think you give the canned dog food to an alligator who is cooking, which isn't, there aren't really, well, no, there is a dog in this game. But why an alligator would want dog food? I don't know. Reasons.
I mean, he's the only one cooking.
MacGuffin.
And he's hungry. He's an animal.
He's a hungry boy. I think he eats the can and all, too.
Isn't the alligator Cajun as well? Doesn't he have kind of like some sort of,
yeah.
It's implied that he's Cajun?
Maybe. There's another alligator, too, that you talk to him and he's an artist and he's written out to sound like, oh, yeah, this is my new work. I hope you like it. I love it so much.
There's so much great humor in this game.
There really is, man.
Sorry, side tangent here, but have you guys played Earthbound?
I haven't, no.
Check back with me in September.
Ooh. There's so much humor. It's kind of like the same kind of humor. It's so self-referential and like incredibly tongue-in-cheek. So much good humor in both of those games.
One of you mentioned nostalgia. I'm sorry, I don't quite remember which one. Maybe both of you. There was a new kind of section here in Link's Awakening that now these days might hit nostalgia a little harder. There are side-scrolling sections, almost bizarrely in this game, and they frequently feature thwomps, Goombas, and piranha plants. I think I saw one of these as a kid, and I remember thinking like, oh, just all Game Boy games are part of the same thing. Because Game Boy to me back then was Pokemon, Mario, a little bit of Metroid, and this. So when I saw Goombas in Link to the Past, I was like, oh, okay. It's just one company that just makes all the video games, and that's it.
I mean, going back to what I said earlier, that's kind of how I felt as a kid. I was just like, I didn't think twice. It wasn't that weird to me that those characters were in there. As far as side-scrolling stuff goes, I mean, that was in Zelda before. I think Link to the Past was like the first one to buck the trend.
Yeah.
Oh, did I screw that up?
There was side-scrolling parts in the first game, and Link's Adventure of Link, whatever the hell the second Zelda is called, is like all side-scrolling.
Right. We don't have that rock feather. The rock feather gets you jumping like Mario. It's pretty crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. I did know about Zelda too. I think that's what I was tuning into, Alex, was the rock feather and the Mario. But yeah, I'm glad you guys are here because, as I've said many times, my experience with this franchise is minimal. So thank you for catching that. Those side-scrolling sections too got me thinking. I did some digging and found an interview with Tezuka. I think maybe it was part of what are those interview series Iwata says?
Ask
Is that what they are? Yes, maybe that's it. And they were asked about the Twin Peaks stuff and all of these Easter eggs like Mario, Kirby, Yoshi, etc. And as recently as I could find, to this day, Tezuka can't remember if they actually got permission to use any of these because they were just goofing off. They were just throwing stuff to the wall and seeing what stuck.
I love it.
Bunch of rogues. As far as it plays otherwise, though, if you've played A Link to the Past, you're going to be relatively comfortable here. It's still isometric. You're still moving sort of with the D-pad. You can unequip the Master Sword, but you've got your A and your B buttons to use your sword and shield, sword and feather to jump, feather and bow if you want. The options are not limitless, but there are a lot of them. You still have your hearts, you still get hit, you still take heart damage. When that's gone, if you have a fairy bottle, or I think it's called secret medicine here that you get from a lady named Crazy Tracy, you come back. If not, then it's game over. So in that way, it is very sort of in the formula of Link to the Past. This kind of lives, like this whole game lives with one toe outside of that formula. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, you mentioned the item screen and being able to equip items. That's something that I think when you, or at least for me, when I'm playing some of these old retro games, and today it seems so normal and intuitive to have an item screen where you can go in and you can switch your sword to A or B. And, even just and it's just kind of funny. We have these controllers now that you can, even have back pedals and all this other stuff. Just it's wild. And then you have the Game Boy, which is your D-pad. You have a select start and have A and B. So you're pretty limited on what you can do. And I remember to this day, just how big of a deal it was for me as a kid that I had the agency to choose to have my shield and my sword, or to not even use a sword and have like my attack weapon be the hook shot or whatever, which is super overpowered in this game. Shouts out to hook shots. but it's just like, it was a cool thing. And like, I remember being a kid and be like, oh, it's so cool that I can go to the start screen and I can switch up my items around. That's wild. Which today it's like, no, that's not wild. That's normal. But yet we didn't have that at the time.
It is very cool, but I'm going to pull the last pin that I put in. And Keith, I think this was you that mentioned this, so I'm going to volley to you. You've got to go to the start menu a whole lot in this game.
It sucks. It's the one thing about the game that I can't defend. It sucks, and they fixed it in the 2019 remake. So,
right,
like, there's no reason why the Rock's Feather can't be equipped at all time. There's no reason why there's
no XY button, bro. That's why.
Or there's no reason why like the running shoes or whatever they are in this game can't be equipped at all times. It just kind of sucks. And that's probably just not only because of the lack of inputs, but the amount of programming that they could do. They're probably really held back by how limited they were with the Game Boy hardware.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they to be clear, they did a lot of amazing stuff with what they had. Yeah. But I mean, look, it's not a magic box. I mean, one thing that this game does extremely well is, when you go to the last dungeons, you are going to be using everything that you've got. Like from the beginning, like all the way, the first thing that you get is like the magic powder. You're using that up until the end, which is great. But like Keith said, that means you're going to, I mean, if you watch a Let's Play or if you play for yourself and get to the final dungeon, you are spending like 40% of the time going into the start menu and switching things up. And it's a pace killer. I mean, there's no better way to put it. It's one of those things, like game design is a living thing and it kind of evolves. And back then, this was just like, oh, like you use everything cumulatively from the start. That's a win. But these days, it's like going into the pause menu like twice every screen is a pacing killer. It's just something that we have grown to recognize. It's hard to like, I don't know. On one hand, it's hard to fault them for that because like, what else could they have done? Like,
right.
to quote Alex, there's no X or Y button, bro. But like, you know, what else could they have done? But on the other hand, I mean, playing this was frustrating in those later dungeons because of exactly what you said, Keith.
And I will say, it's not defending opening the menu every 5 minutes, but this was the first Zelda game until Breath of the Wild. And somebody might be able to correct me on that, but I think it was until Breath of the Wild where you could completely just unequip all of your weapons and just use a shield and a bomb or something, and the shield actually had tactile use. You had to use it in puzzles where you had to push things. So you didn't get that in other Zelda games until Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, pushing things with the shield is actually one of my first memories with this game because my aunt and godmother, Sue, actually had a Game Boy, and this was one of the games that she played, and when I'd go over to her house, she'd let me play it. So that's like was my original introduction to Link's Awakening, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and she's like, oh, you got to get the shield, and that will push like the spiky thing on the beach. And like I remember just like that happening as a kid and be like, oh, so and then I got a sword. I was like, oh, I got a sword? That's fucking sweet.
Shout out to Sue.
I know, right?
Is Sue still with us?
She is, yeah.
She listening to
Shout out to
this
Sue.
podcast?
Maybe.
Hey, Sue, what's up?
Shout out to you, Sue. I my stomach dropped for a second. I was like, oh shit, did I? Speaking of,
I'm old. I'm not that old. My aunt's still alive.
Nah, dude, you're a spry, handsome young man. You both are. Speaking of the shield, though, and pushing that spiky thing, that's when you find your first sword. Well, not your first sword. It's your sword that got washed away on the shipwreck. And that's the first time in this game, outside of the title screen, that you hear the main theme. How's that for a segue? Let's talk a little bit about the music. I don't know. I love this OST. It's really simple, but I love it. I'm going to volley to you guys. I feel like I'm talking like more than I should be here.
Oh man, you gotta be so outline. It's great, dude. The you can say I don't really know what else to say about it other than I can't believe that this is on the Game Boy. Like they take a bunch of Zelda bops and make it work with 8 bits.
Now, I am not somebody that has played through a lot of A Link to the Past. My understanding is that it only has a couple of like 2, maybe 3 dungeon themes. Is that true?
No, I think all the dungeons are the same in Link to the Past.
Oh, all the same.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I cannot stress this enough. Every dungeon here has a unique sound to it. That is incredible on the Game Boy, dude. 1993. That is incredible to me.
No, yeah, and you talk about, I mean, we've been talking about how graphically this being a technical masterpiece for the Game Boy, but the music is also very much a technical masterpiece as well. So, I mean, yeah, and the interesting thing to me is that Koji Kondo is like the master of repetition. I don't want to like mean that in like a bad way, but in the way that like a lot of the musical themes like carry on throughout the franchises that he works on. And aside from that overworld theme that we hear in Link's Awakening, there really isn't any other Zelda melodies in this game. It's mostly original music, and you don't hear much of it in any of the other Zelda games either.
Yeah, dude, it blows my mind. I mentioned Kazumi Totaka worked on this, but again, the lead composers were Minako Hamano and Kozue Ishikawa. And both of those women, this was their first OST. That's mind blowing to me. They knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, to kind of building off of what Keith was saying about repetition. I think that not only from game to game, but and this works with all especially this era of Zelda games. And I think it's very pertinent in this game on the Game Boy, that repetition bit, right? So you have whatever track is playing in whatever dungeon or overworld part, but if you stay there, it repeats. But they've done this job where all of them they're done so well that unless you're spending a lot of time in a certain area, at least it doesn't get too crazy, drive me too nuts. But I really think they've done a great job of creating music that's enjoyable to live with for the duration of your gameplay.
And I think a lot of the music in the Zelda franchise, here's the thing. I have a lot of hot takes about the Zelda franchise, but if it's one thing that I can agree with most people on is that the soundtracks for all of the games are amazing. And because of the music that has been set up early on and carries on through the franchise, it doesn't matter what entry you're coming into. Somebody, me and Alex's age if we stop playing a Zelda game, stop playing any of the newer entries and come back to any new ones, there's going to be a callback. And I mean, just speaking to Breath of the Wild, there's so many there's not a lot of music in that game, but there are little callbacks to familiar music, and that's going to hit you no matter who you are or where you played your first Zelda game, because it's, again, that repetition, that familiarity with the other games. You're just like, oh yeah, I remember this game, and this music is just hitting me at the right moment. And I kind of miss a lot of the tunes from this game in a lot of the other Zelda games. Am I expecting the complete bop of Animal Village to fucking come into any of the other newer Zelda games? No, probably not. But I would like to hear maybe a little bit of the melody from the first town that you're in. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now.
Mabe Village.
Yeah. I mean, just the little nice little piano tune there going on. Yeah, I would love to hear that in another Zelda game, but they really don't. So it's a little disappointing how it's great how original the soundtrack is, but also kind of sucks that they never really bring any of it back.
I adore the Mabe Village, Mabe. I don't know. If it were Japanese, it would be Mabe. I love that tune. And I'm so glad that you shouted out Animal Village, Keith, because that is one of my favorite bits of music in this game. And out of curiosity, earlier today, I was like, oh, I wonder how this sounds in the Switch remake.
Dude, the 2019 version's so good.
I'm going to play them back to back real quick. Brother, I cannot tell you how much I hate the 2019 version.
What?
I think it's so bad. It's MIDI dogs and cats, dude.
I love it. It's so silly.
This is the first time this episode that I'm just like, no, I can't.
Right.
I don't know. So you mentioned those two. Do you have any other favorites? And then Alex, I'm going to ask you the same thing. What else? What other bits of music do you like in this game?
I feel like I've just been ranting nonsensically the past 5 minutes, so Alex can have the floor at this point.
No, you guys already mentioned some of the bangers that I do like. The overworld song is redone for Tall Tall Heights. It's it's like a faster, like it's almost like they heightened the pitch a little bit for when you're up in the mountains or whatever. But I like that the play on the tune for that. And then Marin's song's cool. And I think the reason it's cool is, and it's like, it ties into this whole musical theme of this game. Like, I think it's awesome that the music does stand out so much when you have, I know we kind of kicked this off being like, we're not going to get too in the weeds in the story, but you know, the story, you've got Marin who's like loves to sing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so she has her own theme song and everything. And by the end of the game, there's some, I don't know if we got that, I didn't look far enough in the outline, but major spoilers, I guess. But if you don't die in this game, there's like a cool little cutscene you get at the end, where, cause like Marin's whole deal, I don't remember at what point in the game she talks to you and tells you this, but she wishes that she become a seagull so she could fly around the world and sing to folks, which is like this cool, like musical theme that's kind of the undertones of this game. And if you beat the game without dying once, you get a little cutscene at the end where presumably Marin escapes the dream world and turns into a seagull and gets her wish.
That's heavy quotes on the word presumably. They're pretty heavy-handed with implying that that's what's happening.
Right.
I love the theory that Link crashes ashore on this island and he is knocked out, but happens to also be cuddling with a seagull. So in his dream, he thinks it's a woman, but when he wakes up, it's just a seagull.
Yeah. It's happened to the best of us, man. I mean, that's a Castaway knockoff that I'd watch.
So nobody has mentioned Ballad of the Windfish, which is, I mean, I think it is the centerpiece of the game. It's, you after you defeat the nightmares, which is a little on the nose as far as boss names go.
Right.
You collect these instruments, and you have to play the Ballad of the Windfish to quote unquote wake the windfish. And it's an amazing song. It's an amazing. I think it's a very like class. I keep kind of jerking off the soundtrack here, but it's a classic Zelda tune, and it just they never do anything with it. And now that I'm thinking about it, if you don't mind me rambling some more, Wind Waker would have been the perfect time to kind of integrate any type of Link's Awakening stuff, because you are traveling by sea most of the time. You're going to different islands. Maybe a nice little Ballad of the Windfish melody plays in the background somewhere. I don't know.
You get an ocarina in this game too. That's a missed opportunity. We should get Nintendo on the line. They've been fucking up for years.
I want to speak with Tekuba right fucking now. Just one more little thing about the soundtrack before we do kind of talk about the story a bit. One thing, like I've tried to compose pieces before. I think every musician has, and I'm not a composer, but something that you realize pretty quickly is that like composing for piano is different than composing for string section. And composing for the Game Boy for this sound chip, same with the NES, SNES, PS1, whatever. It's a specific skill set, right? You can't just take any composition and put it into the Game Boy and have it sound good. And that's the thing that I kept noticing with every single piece in this game. It fits the sound chip perfectly. Like it takes advantage of everything the sound chip is. Not everything that it has to offer, because I mean, by today's standards, certainly it's a rudimentary sound chip. But it worked within those constraints. We talk about it all the time on this show, right? Limitation breeds creativity. And that's exactly what we see here. I mean, certainly with the entire game itself and the exploration, but with the soundtrack as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to keep jerking it off, Keith, man. It's wink. It is very good.
Yeah, and you're also collecting 6 instruments, and each of them have their own. Like, you can tell the drum is a drum, and you can tell the lute is a lute. And the Game Boy doesn't have that many sound channels. So the fact that they were able to make this song that had 6 discernible instruments in them is incredible.
I thought it was 8.
Is it 8? Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, there's 8.
It's immaterial, but either way, your comment's spot on. They are honestly kind of MacGuffins, and we're getting into the story now, so we could talk about it. They really pretty much are. But you are right. They're somehow able to convince you when you get the organ that an organ is playing. And that's, I mean, is it a 1-to-1? No. But I mean, it sounds close enough. Squint your ears a little bit, you can hear it. But let's talk about the story a little bit. So this takes place directly after Link to the Past, as far as I know. Again,
Does it?
I need to reiterate this. I need to reiterate this, man. The Zelda timeline is notoriously weird, and I am notoriously not somebody that is in bed with this series. So I am just going off of the information I was able to glean by playing and reading on that old internet, at www.internet.com. This takes place sometime after A Link to the Past. How about that? And Link wants to get stronger in case of any future attacks because he's the good boy hero. And while he's sailing, this is all in a cutscene, a really remarkable cutscene beginning that one of you mentioned earlier, by the way. While Link is sailing, his ship is hit by a disastrous storm. He gets thrown overboard, knocked out, and he washes ashore on Koholint Island. He might just be cuddling with a seagull. Who's to say? Who's to say? The game is vague. He is found by this woman, this young girl named Marin, and Taryn, who is her father? ? Adult figure.
Her owner.
But you wake up, and like you both said, Marin very early on expresses that, they're all on this island. It's very small town vibes, just like Twin Peaks. Marin wants to explore. She wants to see the world. She wants to turn into a seagull. And the very, very first thing you do is find your master sword. And it's set up such that, the only way that you can go home is to play this song for the Windfish. And you have to find the 8 MacGuffins, which are the 8 musical instruments. And then you'll be able to go home, because you're not home. And all of this is being told to you by this sneaky owl that's showing up. Pretty much just like the one in Ocarina. Yeah? Mm-hmm. The owl's theme is really great because it's just like this random ascending melody that doesn't really let you hook onto a key. It's very mysterious. And this owl is very mysterious. We don't really know what the owl's deal is for a long time. But eventually, after the 4th or 5th dungeon, the bosses start talking to you. I think it's after the Catfish dungeon, Catfish Maw. And the bosses start saying things like, do you really know what you're doing? Or like, if the Windfish wakes up, we're all gone. And you don't really know what that means at first, but then you find this mural that's painted in a shrine telling you that this is all a dream of the Windfish. And once the Windfish wakes up, all inhabitants, monster or human, will disappear forever. And it seems like somebody wrote this specifically for you because I think it addresses you directly, saying like, you should know the truth or something like that. And that's like the main hook of this game. And I just gotta like pause there and check in. Like, what do you guys think of this plot? I mean, Dream Worlds have been done before, but like in Zelda specifically, what do you think?
I think it's fine. I think it goes with me just kind of liking the weird out-of-box Zeldas like Majora's Mask. It's not... how do I say this? I wouldn't say it's a very depressing game, but it has sort of like this gloom over it, Mm-hmm. Whereas Majora's Mask is very intentionally dark and depressing. This just, Link's Awakening just has an atmosphere. Yeah, I really can't really put like the story, the music, and the way that everybody talks to you in this game. It is dreamlike. It's very weird. And as far as the story goes, like it doesn't like make a whole lot of sense. Because why is Link trapped in this fish's dream? Who is this fish? But yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know if I even answered your question.
hey man, we're just talking, you know?
Yeah.
I love when stories do this. I love when they don't explicitly tell you everything. Like, I don't need to know a why for everything. I just don't. And I like it when they don't, because then it lets you fill in the gaps. There's apparently a manga for this that was adapted that fleshes out a lot of these relationships really well. And I think that's important because, as we said, this is all a dream. I mean, that gets revealed to you and then you kind of have to live with it. And the reason that in the very beginning I called this game a game about impermanence and a game about acceptance is because once you learn that, you need to go home, right? Your goal is to wake the windfish. But then everybody that you're getting to know and getting to feel pride for, like feelings for, you like these people, they're going to disappear. And it's hinted at throughout that Marin starts to develop a crush on you. It's one of those things where it's like written in such a way that you kind of have to use your own imagination to fill in the gaps, but it is all but explicitly stated. And you're starting to form relationships with these people, and you're seeing them over and over again, and you're liking Mabe Village and Animal Village, and at the end of the day, it all goes away. And that's sad. That's really, it's not like Keith, it's like you said, it's not depressing, but there's a heaviness to it. And I love that.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you.
I love that about this game, man. I love it so much.
I do too.
And I love that it also hints, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Alex. I'm going to pass it to you here. I also love that this hints that this is a dream from the beginning. Like, yes, the nightmares, that's a little on the nose, but like the first time you see a Goomba, suddenly that's recontextualized once you realize this is a dream, because you're like, this doesn't belong here. Like, maybe, I mean, look, shout out to Poppy the Keaton for developing this Pepe Sylvia level of conspiracy theory. I'm just teasing. I genuinely thought that was an amazing response. But to me, like, my read on this is like, that's all there because it adds to this, like, is this reality kind of feeling? Alex, I interrupted you. What are you going to say?
No. I mean, exactly what you're saying, like 100%. That's, we've been mentioning, we have this history with this game. So when I first played this game, I was a young kid. So that story even more so it was even heavier at the time. Like if I were to approach this today for the first time, I wouldn't maybe have that same moral like struggle with like, should I wake up from this dream? I'd be like, fuck yeah, wake up, dude. You're an adult. You have bills to pay. Sorry. But as a kid, like you really, I spent so much time in this world on this island, and you run around and you talk to all these characters, and I don't know, you generally feel, it's a video game, but you genuinely like great feelings around them, kind of like you were saying, Rick. And then I remember even as a kid, like getting to the point where I was going to beat the game and being kind of bummed that I had to like wake up and that Link and Marin were never going to bone,
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Link's a very good cuddler.
A little bit, but yeah.
Hey, that's a lucky seagull.
Yeah, I keep coming back to the word organic. And when I compare this to Majora's Mask, I don't want to say like Majora's Mask is like really just ham-fisted with all the sorrow and just hitting you over the head with these depressing themes. Link's Awakening just seems like it's just bringing that organically to you, because it's not explicitly trying to make you feel like you're like, when I first played the game, I was like, oh yeah, I'm in a dream, like kind of what Alex was saying, but in real life was that like, yeah, I'm in a dream and I need to get Link out of this and whatever. I really didn't think too much about it. But then it's like, when Majora's Mask came out, I was a little older. I was like, okay, yeah, I see what this game's obviously trying to do. And then when I came back to Link's Awakening, like a couple years later, I'm like, oh, this is kind of messed up. Like you're essentially having to kill off everybody to save yourself. And, I don't know where I was going with that point. I'm really off tonight. Holy shit.
No, dude, you are fantastic. You're always fantastic. Link's Awakening walked so Majora's Mask could run, kind of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think of Helter Skelter by the Beatles. It's not heavy by today's standards, but without that, we wouldn't have got Metallica and Megadeth, and without them, we wouldn't have had Opeth, and it just goes on, right? I mean,
Opeth,
Link's Awakening
deep
is
pull
not
there, man. I enjoy that.
I fucking love Opeth. Yeah, great band. It's Link's Awakening. I mean, heaviness is how I described it. It's not as depressing as Majora's Mask, but there's a sadness, there's a heaviness to it because, like you said, I mean, unless you are that weird speedrunner that can beat this in under 3 hours, you're going to be spending like 20, 30 hours just exploring this place over and over, talking to Marin and the villagers and that crocodile that talks like this, and he has an art piece that he likes you to see. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop doing that. But yeah, and then it becomes like, do I want to go home or do I want to stay with these people? And supposedly the manga goes into that better because in this game, you got to get to the end because it's a game. And I guess the manga does kind of, ruminate on that theme a little more. So I would be very interested to read it.
I would also say that, like, as this game being one of the first of many Zeldas to add something to the franchise, this is really the first time Zelda really had any personality. Like, the first 2 games were what they were, and A Link to the Past really doesn't have any standout characters that I can think of off the top of my head. But then, you get your characters like the happy mask salesman. You get Tingle. You get Beetle. Like, you get like these kind of like really off the wall characters. And I don't think you get those characters without the people in Link's Awakening.
100%. I forget. Oh, it's somewhere in my notes, but I don't want to delay this to find it. One of the folks that work on Zelda, they outright said, like, if we didn't make Link's Awakening, Ocarina would have been completely different. And then, by extension, Majora's Mask, everything would have been different.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We're talking about, what the story means to us. And if you look at all the other, like, we'll just take from like Ocarina on, there's a formula to the Zelda story, right? So you've got Ganon, Zelda, and Link, these 3 pieces of the Triforce or whatever's going on in the particular game, but it's this continual battle that they have throughout time. And I love that this game doesn't take place in that, because you can play Ocarina of Time, you can play Skyward Sword, you can play Breath of the Wild, or even Tears of the Kingdom. And it's like, I get it, man. Like, it's those 3 doing their fucking thing again. So like, that's why, for me at least, this story, like, I do think it's great because it holds its own. It's fun. It has, like, we're able to speak to it and like the feelings that you get from it. And it's outside of that Triforce stuff, which I love. Like, don't get me wrong, I love all that shit too. But it's like, it's cool that this game lives outside of it.
First of all, yes to all of that. Second of all, feel free to criticize me here. Is that really the first time that we mentioned that Zelda and company are not in this game?
I think.
Or did one of you mention it earlier?
I think somebody briefly mentioned it. We didn't.
Okay.
We didn't go into it.
I know it wasn't me, so phew, I'm sweating. I heard you say that, and I started immediately just the Key and Peele, like, sweat coming down. Just to wrap up the story a little bit, once you do get all of the instruments, you play for the Windfish, you go inside of its egg. It is a giant egg on a mountain, and it's a weird kind of dungeon puzzle where you're facing several enemies that you've seen before you fight the final nightmare. Several forms in the final nightmare, including Shadow Ganon from Link to the Past. And its final form is this double spinning spiky thing called Deathel. And it's a tough boss. It is a tough boss. And once you beat it, it has its last say, like, what are you doing? You're gonna wake it up and we're all gonna go. But then you get to the top and the owl comes down, and the owl sort of lets you know, like, I don't know if it's a he, but the owl lets you know that it's been a spiritual guider for the Windfish. It's part of the Windfish. And once the Windfish was asleep, these nightmares moved in to sort of wreak havoc and take over. And the Windfish speaks to you after it hatches, which, by the way, it looks more like a whale, but it looks terrific. It looks so good. And it says this. It's speaking in all caps with tons of ellipses, but I'm going to, do my best. It says, I am the Windfish. Long has been my slumber. In my dreams, an egg appeared and was surrounded by an island with people, animals, an entire world. But verily, it be the nature of dreams to end. When I dost awaken, Koholint will be gone. Only the memory of this dreamland will exist in the waking world. Someday, thou may recall this island. That memory must be the real dream world. Come, player name, come, thief, in my experience. Let us awaken together. It's beautiful, man. Like, it touches on those, like, you know, what is more important, your actual experience or the windfish that we met along the way? You know, that's kind of what it's getting at. And you play the instruments, you wake the windfish up, and you wake up, Link does, on a piece of driftwood in the ocean, and you look up, and I can't believe this is on the Game Boy because this looks spectacular. And you see the windfish flying overhead, and it looks amazing. The credits start rolling, and if you get the perfect ending, I think, Alex, I think it was you that said this.
Yeah, sorry,
if
blew the load on that one.
Dude, we've all been there. We're young guys. Can I say that? We're if you beat the whole game without dying, you get the perfect ending, which is it's the same ending, but after the credits, you get a flash of Marin on the screen. It's like a drawing of her head and, you know, her profile. And then you see a seagull. Like, as Marin's picture is there, you see a seagull fly away.
It's like
pretty heavy-handed.
It's like Animorphs.
Kristen Applegate could never. I think that's her name. Oh, terrific series. I kind of prefer the ending without that because it leaves it a little more nebulous, a little more like I like the idea as a player of Marin living on, seeing the world. But just from a narrative perspective, I would prefer that to not be there. Leave it open-ended, man. Like, you don't need to give your players everything. You know, the Windfish even just says, like, someday you may recall this island. That memory must be the real dream world. So don't betray that by showing us, like, hey, by the way, Marin got what she wanted. No. I mean, it's fine. They hid it behind something that's incredibly difficult to do. I died so much in this game. Right. So, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think with how weird this game was, it deserves more of an ambiguous ending. And I think I'm only saying that because I've never got the seagull ending, so maybe I'm just jealous.
Yeah, me neither.
I mean, full transparency, I watched the perfect ending on YouTube. I couldn't get it. I died almost immediately.
The ambiguous ending is all I've ever known.
This is something that we didn't bring up, that I wanted to bring up. The progression of difficulty in this is all over the place. I mean, the bosses get laughably easy as you progress. In fact, I think one of the hardest bosses is in the first dungeon. The anglerfish that's in the fourth dungeon is pathetically easy.
What a joke. Yeah.
It's like the dungeons are amazing, and then the bosses are just like really like not good. And then you get to the last one and it's like, holy shit, this is the hardest thing ever. But yeah, that's all I had to say about that.
Yeah, I don't want to like take too long, but I think this has some of the best dungeons in the series, especially Eagle's Tower. Eagle's Tower is like, mwah, just perfect.
No, it's good. And Rick, I haven't read the manga. My co-host on Lo-Fi, Luke, he has read some of them, not Link's Awakening, but his biggest gripe, he loves them, but his biggest gripe that he's told me is that, for example, at Ocarina of Time, Link will go into whatever dungeon, and then in the manga basically just fight whatever boss is there, right? Now, the reason that he doesn't like that is because in all of these Zelda games prior to Breath of the Wild, your dungeon was almost like a character in itself. And I think that stands true in this game as well, right? So you spend time
Truman
like they
Capote
all
over here.
Yeah, right. So they all have their own different flavor, and that's one of the things that I really do like. I'm an outlier with you guys in the sense that I actually like Zelda puzzles. I enjoy them. I think they're like not incredibly hard, but they tickle my brain just enough where I'd look forward to them and I enjoy them. But so in addition to just that, the puzzle tasks that you get in each dungeon, in almost all of, and in this game included, each of those places have something different about them that makes it unique. And I think that's really important. And one of the reasons why all Zelda games shine, because each of those dungeons they're unique and special. You know, they're their own characters in themselves.
Yeah, incredibly well said, man. I mean, I'm not going to tell you not to like the Zelda puzzles. But your description of them, is spot on. I mean, they tickle the brain just enough. You know, It works. Tell Luke to play some Tetris, and we could talk about this. Shout out to Luke. And since I said shout out to Luke, I think it's time to wrap this episode up. First of all, now that we've kind of come through the whole story, the soundtrack, the visuals, everything, safe to say this game is phenomenal. One of the best the Game Boy has to offer. Not my favorite Game Boy game, but it is one of the top. And I think, and not to speak for you guys, but I think we all give this a definite, play this game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're gonna pick anything in the Zelda franchise, I mean, there's quite a lot of very good handheld Zelda games out there. So you're eating good already. But if you really want to go back to where it started, this honestly is not a terrible place to start. It holds up very well, in my opinion. And even just as like you said, Rick, it just as a Game Boy title itself, it's good to have in the library.
I hope to own it physically one day, man. I do. Alex, do you have anything to add before we start the shout-outs?
Nah, man, just get over to your game store and buy it. What are you waiting for?
Bro, I found it loose for $50, man. It's an expensive title.
Yeah, I have who knows? I don't know how I got it as a kid, but Game Boy's going up, man. I collect for Game Boy, and these top tier games you're gonna pay a penny for, but this one's worth it. And I think even if you're not gonna collect the cart, if you have NSO, that type of thing, I love how accessible this game is. You can, I think you're gonna have a great experience whether you're playing on the Switch, whether you get a hold of the original cart, or nefariously get a hold of the ROM online. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. It's your business.
Oh, the police are
but it's a great game. Yeah. But it's one of my favorite, and I think especially for folks that are Game Boy curious, they should check out this game for sure. And it's fun, man. There's new games coming out for the Game Boy even today. They renamed it. It's a project called. It used to be called Dragonborn, but they're calling it Dragon M. Bad decision. In my opinion. But my point is that it's a very Zelda-esque game, and we wouldn't be getting these new games like this for the Game Boy if we didn't have games like Zelda to begin with.
Also, if you want the quality of life stuff, play the 2019 remake. I mean, it's beat for beat like the exact same game.
Hella buttons.
Hell yeah. It's got those X and Y buttons.
And I think, just to put icing on the cake, that remake is like he said, it's step for step. And the fact that I was able to play that, most of the time he'd be like, oh, I've already played this game. Fuck it. I don't need to play it again. But this game is good enough where I had recently played it on Game Boy and enjoyed my playthrough again on the Switch. It's that good of a game. And once you know all the beats, maybe you can shave it down, that 10-hour playthrough, down to 3 hours like the Help Me Online.
Yeesh. No thanks. I'll get to the remake eventually. But for today, I really, guys, thank you so much. I don't think I could have talked about this with two better folks. I mean, at least not that I know of. You guys have a lot of Zelda knowledge, and, as I said, you're well-spoken, you're funny, this was a great episode, and I'm really glad that you were here. But first, before we get into the wrapping up, the review, and etc., I want to give you a space to tell my listeners about your show, once again, and where they might find it. So Keith, I want to start with you, if that's cool. Tell us a little bit about Main Quest, and if you don't mind, something I've started asking folks since your last time on the show is once you sort of tell us about what your show is all about, could you give us a recommendation for a first timer? What episode should they listen to first?
Absolutely. So, hi, I'm Keith. I host the Main Quest podcast, which is a retro gaming podcast where I am going through all of the games that I played as a child, replaying them, and trying to decide if they still hold up today. And honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably really like Rick. Why don't you start on the episode on Super Mario Land 3, Mario Land, where I had Rick on as a guest.
Dude, I don't mean to interrupt you because please feel free to go on, but little insider baseball here. I found out the next day that the reason I felt so shitty on that recording is because I had COVID.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh no.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. Anyway, please, it's still a great episode.
And to be fair, I'm not this scatterbrain on my podcast. So I'm basically coming into this show hot off of a break. So it's a bit of rough going for me, but I appreciate you having me on again and saying such kind things. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Rick.
Nah, dude, a little practice triumphant return before the real triumphant return. So check out Main Quest. I'm going to say this about Alex's show too, but I'm a huge fan of both of these shows. Main Quest is really, really good. And, oh geez, I think the first episode of yours I listened to was the JRPG episode with friend of the show, Eric Guess, and his former co-host of the temporarily on hiatus side questing project.
Are they on hiatus?
They're not around. I know that much. But yes, Main Quest. Highly, highly recommend, just like I do for Low 5 Gaming. And I want to hear, Alex, you just actually gave the spiel on the episode before, but I'm going to give you the floor again to repeat whatever you might like to, because we recorded that episode over a month ago at this point.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, thanks again for having me back, Rick. It's always a pleasure. Super fun to talk to you about all things gaming. And it was also really fun to be able to hang with Keith on this episode. So excited about that.
Yeah.
But Low 5 Gaming, it's a monthly that I do with my co-host and brother Luke, and we cover, it's basically backlog book club style. So we cover old games, new games, whatever we're feeling that particular month. We go back and forth on picking which game we're going to cover. Sometimes we open it up to the audience, but usually like to be selfish and just choose the games ourselves. but as far as like if folks have made it this far in the episode, fuck yeah, you guys are awesome. But I'm gonna actually pitch another one of Rick's episodes that I did with him a while back on Death's Door. So that's in the pixelprojectradio archive. But that's a great Zelda like, so you can get a little bit more of my flavor there. And then if you're really feeling feeling it, I need more Alex in my life, you can check out Low 5 Gaming. And I would recommend, just choose a game that you like. But you listen to a Zelda episode, so you might be into Zelda. Our Ocarina of Time is a nice one because that is my favorite game of all time, and we get super nostalgic on that episode. We don't always get nostalgic on our episodes, but that one, it's hard for me not to. And that was a fun one to do. Or Skyward Sword. I need the Zelda one. We got Zelda episodes out there.
I was going to say, yeah, I guess I should pimp my Zelda episodes. I've done 1, 2, and if you want more Link's Awakening, there's a Link's Awakening episode. A lot hornier than this episode, but it's there if you want it.
I've listened to it. It's good shit.
Thanks. I appreciate it, man.
It is good stuff.
All your stuff is good. So let's just get a group hug going on here because you guys are wonderful.
a big naked group hug.
Oh, shit.
This is recency bias. But the Low 5 on Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, just came out. And it's very, very good. That's one of my favorite games. Listen to that episode. Then listen to Keith's episode with me on Super Mario Land 3, Wario World. Then listen to this. So you're going to have to do some time manipulation, but that's okay. You can handle it. Then, once you've listened to this, listen to Keith's episode, Link's Awakening After Dark, and then you're set. If you could successfully do that, reach out to me because you are a wizard, and I want to know you. Anyways, before this gets a little too off the rails, I'm going to pitch our stuff. Listen, you can find us anywhere you find anything on the internet, www.internet.com. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You just search the name of the show, we pop up. In the show notes, we're going to also have a link, get it, to the Discord. If you want to join in on the community forum, if you want to just talk about the episode and give your thoughts, it's an awesome place. I love hanging out there. It makes me feel like I'm actually doing something good, like people hanging out, having a good time. It's great. We've also got a Patreon. And look, I say this every time. I'm not going to lie to you. Money me, please. It's great. Hit me with 2 rupees and you get extra episodes. You get to choose games that I do for the Patreon. Upcoming this month is Donkey Kong 94, which is my favorite Game Boy game, tied with Pokemon Red. And it's just a ton of fun. But, of course, it's never expected. You don't have to give any rupees. But what you could do, if you wanted to make it up to me, if you wanted to be a real good sport, is leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcast, Podcast Addict, or Spotify. And I happen to have one today from friend of the show and friend in real life, going on Podcast Addict as Matt Pittsburgh. Matt PGH. I'm assuming that's Pittsburgh. Here's what he has to say. He says, 5 stars. Fantastic show. I've been enjoying PPR for about a year now, and I can't say enough good things about it. The games are varied, leaving something for everyone, no matter your taste. Personally, I've never played 85% of the games reviewed on this show, yet time after time I enjoy listening to the experience. Rick has a really good flow. He often, thank you, he often has a guest host or hosts with him, and the back and forth is always vibey. Yeah, I would agree with that today. Of course, before departing the show, his and Ben's chemistry was unmatched. I'm hoping to hear him back on the show again someday. Not to detract from everything I just typed, but recently Rick put out a few solo shows on which he absolutely shines. You can tell he put some special sauce on them. Oh, I did. I could go on, but you really got to listen and see for yourself. Cheers. And cheers to you, Matt. I appreciate the kind words. Matt's been a good friend of mine since college. We went to school together. That's as far as I'll dox him. He's a genuinely amazing guy. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Friend of the Discord, too. He's in the Discord, so thank you very much, Matt. And with that, I don't want to take up too much more time because this episode went much longer than I thought it was going to, but the conversation was just so good. So once again, thank you to Keith. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to Keith. We can go any direction here. Really appreciate having such amazing people and amazing podcasters on the show. Genuinely could not do this without them and without all of you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. My saxophone is in the corner. I can't play it. So I guess that means I'm falling asleep. I'll catch you next time.